Welcome everyone to the event From Liberdade to Little Tokyo, Resisting Racism and Erasure, Building Cross-Racial Solidarity. My name is Monica Okamoto, and I am a Fulbright Brazil visiting scholar in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at Emory University and host of this event. On behalf of the entire team organizing this event, I would like to thank the Nippon Foundation and the Japan International Cooperation Agency, Museu de Território dos Aflitos, and Instituto TEPAS for their support. Thank you also to Emory University for hosting this event. Well, in my view, I think this project managed to connect Brazil, the US, and Japan, showing the real meaning of solidarity, not only ethnic, but also academic. And personally, this project provided me with a great learning experience about the city of São Paulo, city where I was born and raised, and more specifically about the Liberdade neighborhood. Liberdade was a space marked by the presence of multiple ethnic racial groups at the beginning of the 20th century, especially the Black presence. Throughout the 20th century, the city of São Paulo began a process of remodeling and urbanization, and in each project there was always a gradual expulsion of the poor population, generally Black, from some areas of the city, and the Liberdade neighborhood is an example in this sense. Today, Liberdade is known as a tourist hub, but this neighborhood that was residential became an Oriental tourist neighborhood in the 1970s, when the city of São Paulo, inspired by American Chinatowns, remodeled this space. I think the big issue here was the way these urbanization projects were implemented. In other words, with each renovation project, there was an erasure of the history and memory of the Black population residing in this neighborhood. This practice of erasing and silencing the voices of discriminated population is recurrent, which show us the importance of demonstrations of resistance and ethnic solidarity. Thus, this project brings a little of the individual and collective memory of these ethnic racial groups who lived in this space and built their memories, but which unfortunately were forcibly erased. Well, let us then begin the presentation of the project organizers. The Brazilians Augusto César Uyama, who is coordinating the exhibition in Yokohama, Japan, and is currently based in Kyoto. And Gabriel Kodo Isuka, working in São Paulo, and Desiree Carneiro from Fortaleza, Brazil. Kelsey Ichikawa, representing the USA, is the main organizer of this event in the USA. So I give the floor to the organizers. Augusto?
Yeah, this can start.
I think I'll start. Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Carneiro. I'm an architect. I'm also a racial and urban study a researcher in the University of São Paulo. I would like to thank you, the organizers of the event. I'm really glad to be here. I'm gonna apologize for my rusted English, but I'm gonna try to give a little context for everyone about the exhibition that is connected with this event. So the exhibition is about Liberdade. As Monica said, Liberdade is in São Paulo. São Paulo is a big city, is the largest and most populated city in the Latin America. It's a really segregated city too, also by class and race. And Liberdade is in the center of the city, a center that is no longer financial, but it is still social and historical center, really connected with the colonial dynamics of the city. And we start to think about this exhibition in a really different context. We used to work, me and Augusto, and technical assistant, as we call. It's a type of architecture office, a little bit different because we work collective with social movement, especially to build social housing. And at that point, we're doing something a little bit different because we're working with cultural organizations, Kenjinkais specifically. There are Japanese associations that are allocated at Liberdade. So that's how we get to this territory. Augusto and Kodo also have a connection with the Kenjinkais. And when we get there, we have a lot of demands, of course, about the architectural project, but we also understand that these associations are in a really sensitive spot because this is the beginning of 2022 and we are after the pandemic. So these associations, just as the whole world took a big hit with the pandemic. And it's important for us to rethink the use of these spaces. So we want to do something that we normally do in the technical associations. There are participatory dynamics where we think collective about the projects, the architectural projects. And at that point, we wanted to do this with an exhibition because for us it's important to understand the history not only of the Kenjinkais, of the associations, but also the history of the neighborhood in a sense of Sankofa, as we call Sankofa. It's an African bird that is walking forward but looking back. That's a little bit what we wanted to do and to understand this history to know how we're gonna move forward. And at that point, the Black movement in the neighborhood, as I'm sure will be more discussed later, it's really strong and is revoking this territory also as a Black territory. So we think this is important to understand this neighborhood. The Kenjinkais also are not just one place, they are allocated through the neighborhood. So that's why for us, it's important to understand that. But unfortunately, this project was no longer of interest of the associations because internal decisions, they have a change of directors. So this was another reasons. And then later, after not connected with the associations or with the technical associations, Augusto took this project partially, only the part that we discussed, the neighborhood and the Black and Japanese population in this neighborhood. And he submitted this project in Japan, where it was accepted. And that's the project that we are talking right now. So this was a little bit of the beginning. I will pass it to Kodo.
Well, thank you, Daisy. Well, my name is Gabriel Kodo Izuka. Uh, I am currently studying letters at São Paulo University, and I'm working as a school teacher assistant in Salsolete Elementary School, which is located near Liberdade and Bexiga neighborhoods. And well, I would like to do some initial considerations about the exhibition. And well, we started. One of the main questions that arose while we were preparing this exhibition was how to fairly symbolize this multiplicity of ethnic origins, personal trajectories, and worldviews that characterize the people who make Liberdade be what it is. And this difficulty gets bigger when we consider that the neighborhood is always changing, while new immigrants from different countries keep arriving, local business reinvent itself to grapple with new customers' needs, and traditional institutions search for strategies to stay relevant for the new generations. Besides that, not every fact or process that is relevant for the communities who live there is well documented nor uncontroversial. So, for what we had to rely deeply on oral history, even though it sometimes came from conflicting perspectives. On the other hand, we had to consider too that comprehensive and ethical as we sought to be, every exhibition is subject to material limitations and interferences from worldviews of its staff members. So we have to assume some elementary premises to guide our work. The first of them is that we could not ignore that those different waves of immigration arrived in an already unequal country, grappling. Oh, oh. So uh, those different waves of immigration uh, arrived in an already unequal country, grappling with long-time effects of centuries of slavery and structural racism. We could even dare to compare, in a lesser or wider extent, the process of social integration of Asian Brazilians to the racial triangulation structure and the consequent model minority discourse you certainly know well in the United States. Uh, the second one is that even though recent disputes have risen, especially around between Nikkei and Black communities on what should be the prevalent collective memory on the neighborhoods, a reconciliation is still possible based on inter-racist solidarity and historical reparation between and for both sides. In this sense, it's necessary to remember that both communities have lived together for decades, and cooperation episodes, like the ones we observed at São Gonçalo Church, for instance, happened more than usually assumed. Finally, the third one is that we should not and have made an effort not to skew facts or collected material based on any bias we, as part of the neighborhood communities, naturally carried on. This implied is also in trying not to deliver a one-sided narrative rather than a puzzle of true stories of ordinary people who live and build this neighborhood as it is, so as the visitor could try to solve it himself. Uh, if we were successful in seeking those premises, only the public can judge, but we hope that we could show at least a little bit of all what Liberdade neighborhood signifies. So thank you for listening, and thank you for the organizers and everyone who is involved in this project and who is listening to us today. And now Augusto will do some considerations on how this exhibition is organized. Thank you.
Valeu, Kodo. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, depending on where you are geographically. So, as Daisy and Kodo said, our journey came from far, far away. There are immense amount of history, ancestry, and souls in this project. And history often needs to be read, not for what it reveals, but it especially for what it hides. So just to give one personal context, because this project is also very personal for us. I grew up in this neighborhood because of school, and my grandpa and grandma participated in one of the local Kenjinkais. And until high school, more or less, I never heard about the indigenous and Black history of this place. So I'm immensely glad I was able to be affected by this hidden story and by a variety of lives, individual and collective lives, especially from housing and homeless movements, as Desi mentioned. And more recently, due to this project, the Museu dos Aflitos and Instituto Tebas, which shared with us, I would say, even more traumatic, this kikoenai koe, these unheard and erased voices, and also very powerful hidden stories like Chaguinhas, Tebas, Madre Eunice, and her granddaughter Rosimeire, Padre Enis, Abilio, and Patrícia, who's going to be the next presenter. And we got to know more about the yellow Asian side as well. So through stars like Margarita Watanabe, Dona Alice, Monica Urasaki, and Fujita's family from Sol Bookstore. I'm not sure if they are watching us, but if they're watching us, hello, Lucia and Roberto. So I think personally, this exhibition is also about what no one ever told me when I was growing up. And in other words, we want to say also that there's something structural here. In Brazil, Japan, and I believe in the US as well, in many cases, problems are not solved, they are literally erased. So anyway, more than recovery, these collective memories, it also an invitation. So we invite the audience to be affected by the stories of the places they live and visit. So in this project, I'm gonna share my screen now. So in this project, executed in four crazy months, but planned 1 year ago. Okay, sure. Not sure if you've already seen it. Yeah.
Yes, it's not full screen, but we can see your
Okay.
window. Yeah.
So yeah, so we try our best to include a few moments considered more relevant for this exhibition and base it on the diversity of our group. So art, tradition, and daily life of celebrating, cooking, prayer, and resistance, and honoring and respecting ancestry, including ancestries in life. So yeah, many layers here. So in terms of methodology, we carried out a variety of interviews, interviewing people at 4 a.m. because I'm in Japan, so it's very challenging. And we collect these oral histories. We work with participatory cartography. So here in the background, you can see the participatory cartography. Photos from public and personal archives. So like Erasure, and we're going to expand this later. And we are very carefully selected the construction materials like this one, right? And this other one, which is like a alternative story or portal. So the symbolic elements made of bamboo and earth. Someone is talking. Oh no. So anyway, these two elements, bamboo and earth, or adobe, aiming to represent the yellow and black communities of Liberdade. We're covering the materiality, especially from their traditional houses and historically and culturally associated with their daily life in diaspora. So the earth soil also symbolizes the Aflitos cemetery, this important place of the neighborhood's Black history. So I collect these materials in Kyoto with support of Inoue Akihiko sensei. And yeah, everything is sustainable and reusable. So this exhibition is divided into three main sections: daily life, erasure, and resistance, aims to open up some perspective, to reflect on the often untold fights for freedom or right to the city in localities in Brazil, but not only. And yeah, last but not least, we never expect to be able to hold this exhibition about this very meaningful place in Yokohama, where part of the Japanese diaspora began. And even more unimaginable is that is literally in front of the Japanese Overseas Migration Museum, which is like here behind it, at JICA. So yeah, I don't know my mental condition will be like in the end of this event, because here in Japan is already 3:20 a.m. So on behalf of the group organized the expography, I just want to say Viva Liberdade, Viva J-Town in LA, and Viva San Jose, and Viva all the comrades we connected with through this project. So thanks so much for being here, guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Augusto, Desiree, and Gabriel. Gabriel wants to talk.
He's clapping.
Oh, no, he's like, I was just clapping hands.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, please note that all the end of all presentations, we will have a Q&A session. So feel free to add your questions and comments in the chat, or ask your questions directly to our discussants. So let's move on to the next presentation. Henrique Yagui Takahashi, PhD candidate in Latin American cultural and literary studies, Ohio State University, and Patrícia de Oliveira, activist from Movimento dos Aflitos in São Paulo. They will discuss the topic Brief History of Liberdade and its present political resistance infrastructures, cross-racial solidarity and actions. So, Henrique and Patrícia.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Henrique. So how can we organize this? I will start and then you start.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
I will share my screen. It should find it on means of it's in full screen now for you. Okay, so I will address a history that has been almost completely erased in special terms, of course, which today emerges in active actions, tributes, and in social and civil struggle. And it's very important to be here in this event. I always thanks to Augusto for this invitation, because I'm here to tell other side about this place. And this place is hardly today recall this memory when you try to look for the concrete buildings or for the material memory. It's hard to find it, but the story of the slavery in city in São Paulo, it's important to tell in every opportunity that we have. So it's also important to tell that my approach is about the memory and memorialization of slavery and crimes against Black people, Black slaves, and colonial imperial periods. And of course, they don't summarize the experience and can handle with the cultural experiences and Black population from before and today. But my idea and the idea of one of the ideas of the Aflitos movement is to talk about this traumatic period and in traumatic layers also. because we're talking about crimes, and crimes are also ever traumatic. So the word freedom is heavily loaded with symbolism and holding different meanings. Apart from its polysemic nature, it's also paradoxical. The experience of freedom differ between those in diaspora and those who have emigrated, and it influenced by both in the word itself and specific territory. However, despite these distinctions, different communities have coexisted and formed their own histories with the same geographic space. I will try to shed light on the espaciality liberdade, a Portuguese word meaning for freedom, and its violent history for the Black population in São Paulo. While the presentation, I will use maps and historical dates. In my speech, I will try to emphasize the top through local observations, through interviews, and through my own research about this space and instruments, especially about instruments of violence. So here, if it works, here. First one, Liberdade became a densely populated area in 18th century, only 19th century, and the end of it, not in the beginning. Between 50 and 58, São Paulo was marked by urban center with a small, turtle, and narrow streets, with a concentration of few public buildings, even religious buildings, 2 or 3 at the beginning, such as Franciscan, Benedictines, and Carmelite churches and convents, concentrated around what we know about Praça da Sé, or cathedral, today. From this center, composed by this cathedral, followed many the roads that maintain or the commercial trade between the city and other core villas in São Paulo state, and even with another state like Rio de Janeiro, especially here. And here, the cathedral, the center, and Liberdade was especially here. There wasn't a place for resting instead of passing through. This region was called Caminho to Ibirapuera, and later was Caminho de Carro para Santo Amaro, here. It was a rural region, almost like the outskirts of the city, mainly due to this geographical position on the roads to Rio de Janeiro. It was considered, not today, but it was considered as an outlying area. What else here? Okay. This will be proved when we talk about the uses of this location. So, next one. Okay. As indicated by this map, Liberdade was, sorry here, I don't know. Okay.
Patrícia, you muted yourself.
Ok, voltou? Desculpa, tá em... Tô com 2 computadores, um tá em alemão, tá uma loucura. So, repeating, Liberdade was still less populated in the 19th century. Even in a small town, São Paulo has, in that moment, not experienced this prosperity of the coffee plantations or mineral and raw material exportation. So São Paulo was, how can we say, as a poor capital in that moment. And this map shows the region of here of Liberdade was largely covered by vegetation, even forest in this moment, and connections to other locations by roads and routes, not with settlements or occupations. Here, we are not marked, but Liberdade, especially here at this point, Liberdade was in the back of the Triângulo Histórico, the most important two religious points in São Paulo that made the center in the beginning of the colonization. So Liberdade was behind of it. Okay. Yes. So enslavement in São Paulo, different from other cities, until the 19th century, São Paulo was lower than other colonial capitals such as Salvador or Rio de Janeiro, especially due to subsistence and culture maintained by indigenous labor and enslaved black labor. But the slavers and the black slaves was always present in important economic and social movements for the city. Why? Because, of course, in comparing with another capitals, São Paulo has many, have few slaves, but in comparison in the percent, we can say that enslaved population in Vale do Paraíba, in the border with Paraná, another state, when Paraná expanded their sugar plantations, São Paulo starts to receive many and many more enslaved people. However, São Paulo had never a significant, as a capital, the city, never had a significant number of enslaved people. But it contributes for misinterpretation about the description to this spread a myth of, sorry for my confusion, it spread a myth about São Paulo, that capital of the progress, of the liberalism, of the locomotive of the country, that doesn't have slaves or black people and as enslaved in that moment. This assertion is contradicted by the fact that the Liberdade region that we will discuss now is the evidence torture and degrading practice that took place there, including city use for the garbage dump, the cemetery, and the place that was the worst part in the town. There is a corner of the seat for black people, disadvantaged and indigenous that were assigned degrading jobs, including hauling sewage for homes, and were subjected for condemnation, punishment, and even death, with that remains left in the cemetery. We'll take a closer look at the various aspects of social control that were at the heart of the Liberdade core. Okay. Here, I'm showing you enlarged map of São Paulo's city center for the 18th century. This map is unique. It's only in this map that you will see mentioned the tools for torture, death, and punishment. The next one, I made it here. Urban slavery was impossible to think without public punishment instruments. And public punishments constituted the main type of the social control of the enslaved masses, and were also used to indicate to freely educated men the metropolis present in city and small towns. In order to maintain peace and order in these places, it was necessary to create and legitimize a police state, which would guarantee public security and peacefulness through policy institutions and recruitment of unofficial groups, which were in charge to monitoring how the public space was occupied by heterogeneous social segments. These police groups was called like something militias or militias. And these groups or men who were employed by these groups acted as punishers in the pillory. A pillory located in the city of Portuguese origin or occupation served as a symbol of the city foundation as a penal institution. Pillory has had both practical and symbolic purposes. That means Their practical functions were publicity, to fix the regional boundaries, and the execution of sentences of public condemnation. Advertising because posters, information, prices of food or something else, service, people, events in the town were displayed in them. And it also served as a milestone to define the radius of the town began. And in other hand, in a symbolic function, was to be a symbol of a remote power. The villages had local autonomy, but it always important to mark that they were actually always king's servants. The king's eyes were there. And something very important, he was just as important to the village as the church seats would have been to the advent of the cities in the territorial marking. Yet, he was a lay symbol. This was a specific symbol of the liberalismos, especially in Brazil, but also in other countries. In Brazil was the example of freedom, exercise of freedom. During the colonial period in Brazil, a platform of a public instrument were used as a specific form of torture for Black people. Owners employed this method to administer punishments for domestic, private, and patrimonial offenses. In contrast, we can talk about France, for example. In France, they utilized pillories, which were general penal instruments, used in the public sphere and not exclusive to slaves or to punishment in a patrimonial terms. According to Câmara Cascudo, Câmara Cascudo was a Brazilian, not just historian, but also an historian. The pillory symbolized freedom for white men due to two reasons. First, it was a column erected in a visible place as a sign of law, the presence of the law. And two, punishment has to be applied with legal limits set by Portugal. But in the end of the day, they were decided by the local man. So for Câmara Cascudo, the pillory was a totem of the conditioned freedom appropriated to liberal civility. Here I use it just an example about the difference between pillory here and pillory in Europe, especially in Portugal, France, and other places. Pillory has a decorative also reason. And here, this is in Lisboa. And they used pillories not just for the colonial periods or navigation period, but also in the I forget the name, sorry, Inquisition. And here, the difference with the pillory here in Brazil, just with a wood and something very poor and just use it for this punishments. And the other instrument, under the Philippine ordinances for Philip I, especially in 16th century, capital punishment could be combined with torture, cutting off limbs, and dismemberment in the gallows. Distinct feature of the hanging, it was for everyone. The gallows were definitive instrument for punishing incorrigible slaves, especially those associated with leading riots or harassing foremen and owners. Since the gallows could be applied for all men, the gallows would be a reminder of the justice and the justice of earth and heaven. And using this picture as a backdrop, which is a free illustration, but refers to the stories about the square, Praça da Liberdade. Along the gallows, there is also a garbage dump behind them for waste, sewage. This area, which contained later house, gallows, garbage dump, pillory, cemetery, and gunpowder house, was the most undesired area in the city for the Black people. Next. Okay, here. In my speech, I tried to just summarize the symbolical and real uses of these instruments installed in that square, which was the core of the neighborhood until now, I think. And here is this both timelines just like to highlight some historical facts. Due to time constraints, probably I already exceeded. I won't go to each of these events, but here are some timelines to documented events that I found about Gels and Pelourinho, especially in Liberdade. My presentation is called Meanings of Freedom, mainly because it was in location that these instruments had their long period of use, and that events took place that had a profound impact of the city politics, such as the hanging of Francisco José das Chagas, o Chaguinhas, and the same instrument that killed Black people and caused horror to freely residents, as reported in 18051, or that used to flog 40 lashes in people, as reported in 1733 here. Here were the same ones that meant law and order for others who were considered a human being by Brazilian and Portuguese law. Remember that slavery for enslaved people, in paradox, were legally both a thing and a person. For Portuguese colonial law, they were a semi-moving asset because they were a thing without rights and incapable of maintaining obligations. However, on the other hand, as far as the criminal law was concerned, the enslaved person was a person who was punishable and therefore judged by his actions in these instruments. Here's just a teaser, but you can find it in YouTube. And I hope it works. Finally, it's noteworthy to consider that utilization of freedom in a space and the practical purposes of the equipment placed in Liberdade has some reasons. Despite the discourse and implementation of freedom, the symbol of justice and equality for dominant groups is represented by the pillory and gallows. However, only Black people were subject to punishment in this location. The Liberdade area, no Largo da Forca, honored the men of São Paulo and their specific comprehension of independence, but building something like an identity about independence and the men who propelled the nation forward, the locomotive of the country, the Paulistanidade. Liberdade neighborhood served as this symbol, after, of course, pillory and gallows. However, the instruments of this, sorry for this word, cursed part of the city, only served the freedom for the local white elites. The debate over memory is a dispute over life, and that will not only arise within realm of the authorities in the states. That's why I think now I have better news about what this historical struggle. Oh, no, here, no, here. When progress arrived to the city, and specifically for that neighborhood, with the trainways, electricity, non-diasporic immigration of free workers, with paid work for plantations, industries, São Paulo economic prominence with coffee plantations, this destroyed the architecture and constitutive materiality of the memory in that spatiality. But today, movements such as the União dos Amigos da Capela dos Aflitos, Alnanca, Instituto Tebas, Aflitos Territorial Museum, and many other movements and collectives, unfortunately not all represented here in my PPT, are part of this process of recovering the meaning of freedom that we want to have. Not the sense of the freedom of that law that dehumanized, kidnapped, exploited, and killed millions, but in the same, and of course not in the sense of the São Paulo elite, in the symbolizing itself in a dispute of the independence of the country, but not of the man. Now I have some news from there. These photos I took in this week. In this site, especially here in this point, were found 9 human bones, 9 human not bones, but bodies, during the construction of a cosmetic mall, which was take place next here to the chapel. It's hard to see her, but it's here, Capela dos Aflitos. The construction work, which is also very clear here in this photo, the violence of this construction next to the historical heritage site was interrupted by the social movements, forcing the non-visible, non-constructed, but very much alive history and the devotion of the murdered Saint Chaguinhas, the story of the chapel and the cemetery, and the cultural manifestations of the neighborhood not to die despite so much dispute. The sense of the freedom is what animates the local struggle and the fight for the memory of so many who built and still build that neighborhood and our city in our country. I really tried to do this in 10 minutes. I hope that I gave you some older point of views about Liberdade. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity to show another layers about our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrícia. Henrique?
Yes. Can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you, Patrícia, for your presentation. Her presentation is very important to shed light on my presentation, because I will present for you the hegemonic and the dominant discourse about Liberdade nowadays. But keep in mind that her presentation is very important to understand this dominant discourse regarding Bairro da Liberdade. Okay, so well, my name is Henrique Yagui Takahashi. My title is my title presentation is Asian Urban Enclaves at Liberdade in São Paulo, 1914 to 2018. So I will do here like a very brief history of this neighborhood, this dominant discourse, right? This process of orientalization into a touristic zone that erases, it's very important to say, that erases this Afro-Brazilian memory, indigenous memory in this place, okay? So I organized my presentation in 3 parts. The first one is Liberdade as a Japantown, in quotes, in São Paulo, 1914 to 1975. The second one is the Liberdade's Orientalist touristic plan from 69 to 75. I marked here in red because this is a crucial moment, and actually all the current debates that we are having is due to this process of touristic orientalization, which is a way to gentrify this space, right? And finally, major events and debates regarding Liberdade as an Oriental touristic attraction, right? So the first thing here, one major transformation within the Asian community in Liberdade is this movement from like a Japantown to a, in quotes, Oriental tourist attraction. So firstly, Liberdade, or I would say when I'm saying Japantown or Oriental tourist attraction or Oriental neighborhoods, actually they are specific portions and places in the sites within Liberdade area and neighborhood. Okay, so for example, before that, Patrícia, she presented very well the history of the 18th century in Liberdade, and I would like to start talking about the Liberdade before the Japanese immigration arrival in 1914, and according to the scholars back then. Okay, so according to some scholars, some historians, in the early 20th century, Liberdade was a residential urban area occupied by majority Portuguese and Italian immigrants. This is the
the hegemonic discourse that was going on and through some scholars, right? However, I will bring here the perspective of Kazengatou's "Not Everything Was Italian," that is very connected with Patrícia's Oliveira presentation. He criticized the traditional historiography of São Paulo focused on Italian immigration. So basically, the historian, Brazilian historian, regarding São Paulo city, the history of São Paulo city, shed light on the idea that only immigrants, especially European immigrants, build the modern São Paulo, okay? So this traditional Brazilian historiography erases the crucial role of what Kazengatou mentioned as the Brazilian domestic working class, which is Afro-Brazilian indigenous, right? So he shed light in this criticism against so I'd like to start my presentation with this criticism against the traditional historians about São Paulo. So the first moment of urban settlement of the Japanese community in São Paulo, specifically in Liberdade. As some of you know, the Japanese immigrants landed in Brazil the first time in 1908. The first Japanese immigrants, they moved and they settled in Liberdade in 1914, right? In a specific street called Conde Sarzeda Street. Okay, you can see here in this first picture is the Conde Sarzeda Street, and is basically was a residential area for the Japanese community in Brazil. From 40 to 53, we'll have this process of evacuation of Japanese immigrants from Liberdade area during the Second World War. Brazilian administration started to align to the Allies during the Second World War. So all the Japanese immigrants in Brazil became the enemy. So they have to be evacuated within this area of Conde de Sarzedas. And from 53 to 75, we'll have the second wave of urban settlement of Japanese in Liberdade, specifically in the Galvão Bueno Street. So now we have this more business-oriented area for the Japanese community in Brazil. I will highlight here the construction of Prédio Niterói by Nikkei Japanese businessman called Yoshikazu Tanaka in 1953. So it's a 5-story building and with Japanese stores, restaurants, and also the Cine Niterói was located in this building, right? So there is a very important element of the Japanese movie theaters in Liberdade as a way to flourish this the Japanese community in this urban area. Okay. I have two maps here. The first one is by Tomohanda, a very important Japanese scholar, but also painter and many other things. We have here the first formation of the urban settlement of Japanese community. So we have here the Conde Sarzeda Street, which is a slope street, and Conselheiro Furtado Street. So basically these two streets were concentrating the Japanese community in Liberdade in the early 20th century. And then I have a map by Negawa. He has this map from in quotes, the Oriental neighborhood, right, in 1999. So as you can see, we have some differences. Like, for example, the Conde Sarzeda Street is located here, and Conselheiro Furtado Street here. And then this, what we know as today as, in quotes, Oriental neighborhood, this Orientalist tourist attraction. Formerly, as Patrícia said, in the 19th century, as a place of punishment of Black Brazilian population here, for example, at Praça Liberdade. So we have this changing of where the urban placement, the settlement of Japanese was in this throughout the 20th century. The second element here is the Liberdade's Orientalist touristic plan from 69 to 75. According to many press publications in Brazil, either nationwide press publication, such as as well as Asian groups press publications, like São Paulo Shimbun, Diário Nipak, and many others. they put the journalist, Brazilian journalist Randolfo Marques Lopato as the creator of the Liberdade's Orientalist Tourist Plan. And he actually has a very important role to articulate São Paulo politicians, São Paulo's administrations and Asian businessmen in Liberdade. So this combination between this public-private economical alliances, political and economic alliances between politicians, São Paulo politicians, and Asian businessmen in Liberdade, the combination of those two, the alignment of those two is very important for the formation of this orientalization as the process of touristification and orientalization of Liberdade. Who were the São Paulo administrations back then? So we call this, in Portuguese, Prefeitos Biônicos. Biônicos is bionic, the free translation in English. Prefeitos is mayor in English. Basically, they are mayors. So we're here in the 70s, we're under the military dictatorship in Brazil. So the military dictatorship administrators, they appointed the governors and the mayors back then. So there was not like a direct vote back then due to the dictatorship. So, and as a coincidence, the first bionic mayors appointed by the dictatorship regime, they were also the same mayors that supported the touristification of Liberdade, right? These three first mayors were Maluf, Figueiredo Ferraz, and Escolaço. So that's a very interesting data because we have for 3 consecutive administrations, we have these mayors supporting the process of orientalization and touristification of Liberdade. Aligned to them, we have also the foundation of ACAO in 1974, which is in 74, ACAO stands for Bairros da Liberdade Business and Industry Association, majority by Nikkei businessmen. So the alignment of those established the orientalization plan. And I have here a few names. Tanaka is the businessman, the Nikkei businessman who built the prédio Niterói in 53. Mizumoto and Kizaki, that I'm going to talk about him later at the end of this presentation. And also, due to this idea of national developmentalism during the dictatorship regime in Brazil, we also have in a urban context, in a metropolitan context, the inauguration of the first subway line in São Paulo City. So we have the Liberdade subway station located in this blue line, the first subway line station in Brazil, okay? In São Paulo, sorry about that. This is a picture took from the official archive of State of São Paulo. As you can see, we have here in a free translation inauguration of the Oriental neighborhood and the acknowledgement of the support of São Paulo's City Hall here, Prefeitura de São Paulo. So we'll have here very clearly the relation between the politicians and the businessmen, okay. Asian businessmen. Okay. So the last thing here is okay. The last thing here, some very quickly. I can go over like talk more in detail about this more than 50 years, but just a few things about that. In 83, the same business and industry association that nowadays has another name, they have a plan to establish Oriental Culture Center, or Oriental in quotes, but that was the name. During the 80s, we have the Dekasegi movement. So many Japanese Brazilians, they traveled to Japan to work in the factories. So some of the small business people in Liberdade, they were Japanese Brazilians. They left and they sell their stores, especially to the newcomers, the Chinese and Korean immigrations, business people that start to flourish in Liberdade from 80s on. Okay, Also, I'd like to mention some other renovation projects regarding the Oriental Tourist Attraction Liberdade. I can mention Viva Liberdade in 2001, and in a free translation, Imperator's Way project in 2008, when 2008 was celebrating the centennial of Japanese immigration in Brazil. And in 2018, there were this, the Liberdade subway station and plaza have their names changed, and that is connected with this process of erasure of Afro-Brazilian and indigenous memory in Liberdade. So we'll have the change of the names from Liberdade to Japan Liberdade and Liberdade Japan. And for the changing of these names, Ikezaki, as I mentioned before, one of the founders of the ACAO Association, plus we align with some Nikkei politicians, Márcio França as a governor, São Paulo's governor back then, Jorion Doria, the mayor, São Paulo's mayor back then. There were these combinations of between the Asian businessmen, politicians, and São Paulo's administration. They again, as in 75, 69 to 75, with the first process of orientalization process in Liberdade, they again start to develop this idea of demarking this place as Asian ethnic space, right? And as Patrícia Oliveira has mentioned, the Movimento Aflitos, UNANCA, was established and founded and started as a grassroots movement from 2018, claiming for the recovery of Brazilian indigenous memories in Liberdade. So just to finish my presentation, I will share here this documentary, which it's not released yet, but will be released in 2 weeks online. So you guys will have like the opportunity to watch this documentary by Movimento Aflitos Alexandre Kishimoto in 2 weeks. So I can provide more detailed information in the following weeks. So thank you very much. I rushed a little bit, but I will be happy to talk more during the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Henrique and Patrícia, for this fascinating presentation. Well, the next discussants are Susan Hayase and Tom Izzo, founders of San Jose Hidden Histories and San Jose Nikkei Resistors. The theme of the presentation is San Jose, Japantown.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers. We're really happy to be here and really impressed and feel so educated about the Liberdade history and looking to find more out about it. Hidden histories.
Slide.
Oh, so I'm sorry. Could you show the first slide? Okay, thank you. Hidden Histories of San Jose Japantown is a project which combines grassroots organizing, community art, local historians and organic intellectuals, and emancipatory technology to reverse the erasure of the history of San Jose Japantown and to set the tone for efforts to protect the community against gentrification. So it uses AR, or augmented reality technology, that allows an artist to overlay images or video on top of what a viewer sees through their smartphone camera. And we began in 2019, which happened to be the same year that ground was broken on a large market rate apartment building that would take up a complete city block in Japantown. Hidden Histories also grows out of our long-term grassroots engagement with the national conditions of Japanese Americans, as well as deep ties in the local community. It also involves some serendipity. Next slide, please. So, let's see. Yeah, there we go. So organizing in Japantown, we just wanted to show you that we're connected to Japantown. Tom and I became involved in 1980 and 1979, respectively. We were part of a small reverse migration into Japanese American communities after decades of displacement. Somebody could mute themselves. We were born in the 1950s and were the children of Japanese Americans who were former incarcerees in the US concentration camps during World War II. And we came to young adulthood in the late 70s and early 1980s when Japanese Americans nationwide were building the movement for redress and reparations for Japanese Americans. So that was our formative experience in the redress reparations grassroots movement. And we were also involved in community historical projects and other political campaigns and efforts in the city and county. Next slide, please. In 2018, next slide, please. In 2018, we co-founded San Jose Nikkei Resistors to resist Trump's anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, and anti-democratic policies, and more recently to support reparations for slavery and to support reparatory justice for local indigenous groups and other issues like public safety and police accountability. And one of the things that brought people of different generations to SJNR was a search for a progressive Japanese American political identity and a need to be connected to the community, including the physical community. Next slide, please.
San Jose Japantown is a small neighborhood business district anchored by two historic Japanese American churches in about a mile north of downtown San Jose in California. It was one of the three major remaining Japantowns in California. In 1979, it had a large city corporate yard with trucks, sheds, gasoline tanks that took up about a city block in the middle of one side of it. And there were also rundown warehouses and blocks of what looked like old suburbia, mostly small bungalows around it. When we first started our involvement in Japantown, we didn't know much about it. It seemed like a little country town, not urbanized like San Francisco or Los Angeles' Japantowns. And it seemed isolated and disconnected from other communities. However, we soon learned otherwise. Next slide, please. I had a friend in college who identified as a Chicano, Mexican-American. We had both had roots in the San Jose area. He told me that he grew up in Chinatown neighborhood and not Japantown, as I had called it. I thought this was just his family not being very clear on the differences between the two Asian groups, something that I was used to hearing back then. But when I returned from college to work in Japantown, I was eventually schooled by two local historians, Connie Youngyu and a Filipino-American, Robert Raksak, in the history that had almost been completely erased. Connie's father had been born in the Chinatown that had been replaced by the corporate yard, and Robert had been born into a Filipino community in Japantown, which he called Pinoy Town. The missing history starts in 1887, 5 years after the Chinese Exclusion Act. At that time, Market Street Chinatown in downtown San Jose was the largest of 5 Chinatowns. The city fathers hosted an anti-Chinese convention nearby and called for the elimination of the Chinese. Soon afterwards, the Market Street Chinatown was burned to the ground by an act of arson, leaving 1,500 workers homeless. A German immigrant, John Heinlein, owned a plot of land about a mile north of downtown and proposed to build a new Chinatown there that the community could lease. The city tried to stop him, organized protests at the site, and they derisively called this new property Heinleinville. Japanese immigrants arrived in the 1890s and were drawn to Chinatown amid hostility because of hostility elsewhere. And Japantown is said to have started adjacent to Chinatown in about 1900. In the 1920s and 30s, after the Japanese immigration was shut down, Ilocano speaking Filipinos started arriving and settled in the same place. Soon, a thriving Pinoy town emerged on 6th Street, nestled between Chinatown and Japantown. In 1931, John Heinlein went bankrupt, and the city of San Jose seized the property and evicted the Chinese. And after an 18-year fight by the Chinese to protect the temple that's pictured here from destruction, finally in 1949, the city of San Jose completely destroyed what remained of the Chinatown. From 1942 to 45, Japantown became a ghost town with residents and business owners incarcerated by the federal government. In the 1950s, the city erected the corporation yard on the Chinatown site. Also emerging, at least to us, as we learned, was a growing understanding of who else was in the area we call Japantown and nearby. Next slide, please. The area on this map that's in red, denotes one of the largest redlined areas in San Jose. In the eyes of realtors, the presence of so-called Orientals and Negroes made this area unsuitable for investment and formed the basis for housing segregation. Japantown is a small portion of this larger red area, which includes communities of Black people who have migrated to this area during different time periods. For example, there's Antioch Baptist Church down the street from Japantown, founded in 1893, an African-American Prayer Garden Church established in Japantown on 6th Street in 1943. What we call Japantown today was called Chinatown, Japantown, and Pinoy Town by different people at the same and at different times. They don't have a sharp boundaries and they overlap in time and space.
Next slide, please. However, I just want to remind you that when we migrated to Japantown, it was called Japantown. That was the overwhelming information. So the start of Hidden Histories of San Jose, Japantown. So Tomiko Thiel, pictured here, is a friend of mine from college, and we were also fellow Silicon Valley engineers at the same time. But she went off to art school and became an internationally recognized digital media artist, among other things. And I had been nagging her for many years to come create something in augmented reality in San Jose, Japantown. But in late 2019, she contacted us and told us to apply for a Knight Foundation grant for an AR project. So we had 2 weeks to apply, and we thought, how can we use augmented reality to unearth the local history that we were learning about and use that to also fight gentrification? So we lucked out, and we were chosen as one of 5 awardees nationwide. Next slide, please. What distinguished Hidden Histories was the grassroots character utilizing community artists and advisors instead of outside experts, and also how we were positioning it to accomplish the unerasing of San Jose, Highlandville, Japantown, and Pinoy Town in service of rallying support for the sustainability of the community. We wanted people to remember or learn anew their connections to the place. And luckily, we were already connected to people whose lifelong work was to reveal these hidden histories. Their knowledge and stories and deep devotion and heart were the inspiration for the creative process by the artists. Next slide, please. So we trained grassroots community artists to use augmented reality technology in the form of an open source app by Tomiko Thiel and her husband, Peter Graff, that they developed to give her independence from for-profit commercial AR platforms. And this involved a really amazing process of creative collaboration between the artists and the historian advisors and the technical staff. Next slide, please.
Ultimately, we created 8 art installations with 18 AR layers, viewable in Japantown. These showed historical moments from the Highlandville Chinatown history, showed how the Ningxinggung Temple served Chinese immigrants from miles around, showed the connection between all 3 Asian immigrant groups to local agriculture, and showed hidden histories of organizing that resulted in the building of community institutions. Next slide, please. If we had hired a single artist, or if we had curated a unified style of the art pieces, we would have missed out on the incredible richness and diversity of the artistic vision and perspectives of our diverse artist pool. We had young artists with digital media skills and little historical knowledge, but were hungering for that knowledge. And we had older community artists with no digital media skills, but with lived experience and connections to the community. Next slide, please. Walking tours. Initially, we had thought AR would liberate viewers to walk around and see the artwork themselves, but we discovered that technology is actually more social than we'd assumed. Walking tours were a way for us to meet more people and talk more about our concerns for the future of the neighborhood. And it's a tool that we wanted to make available to more people in Japantown. The emotional value of these tours is related to the political value. It is deeply moving to be in a place with other people if we take the time and effort to really be there. We think that it helps people be human and whole, which we need if we're going to do what we have to do to change society, build multiracial democracy, and fight authoritarianism and fascism.
Next slide, please. So while we were working on the Hidden Histories project, the city began discussions on what to name the city park. So the park was planned for a space next to the new apartment high-rise buildings on the footprint of the former Highlandville Chinatown. So a growing understanding of the Highlandville story among Japantown folks led to a call to name it Highlandville. So it was up to the Parks and Rec Commission to propose a name, and their choice was Sakura Park. So we and others thought that that name represented kind of a generic Japanesey aesthetic, and that it would also be covering up the extreme racist political violence that had birthed Highlandville Chinatown, and also birthed Japantown and Pinoy Town. So San Jose Nikkei Resistors worked in coalition with members of history, arts, and other organizations with a letter writing campaign to the city council to demand that the park be named after Heinlein and the Chinatown. And the campaign elicited really amazing statements from all ages and backgrounds in support of a name that would represent the true history. So this successful campaign in the naming of Highlandville Park eventually led to efforts by our historian Connie Young-Yu and others to get the city of San Jose to hold itself accountable for the anti-Chinese campaign in the 1880s that led to the burning of the Market Street Chinatown. So we feel that the city's official apology in 2021 should be seen in the context of a growing movement for reparatory justice. And it's an act that is so rare that it made international news. Next slide, please. So Hidden Histories is not a done deal. We feel that it's a demonstration of what's possible, and we hope to be able to expand it. We'd like to expand it to include more Pinoy Town stories. We'd like to include a story about the Prayer Garden Church. And we'd also like to move beyond Japantown to the original site of the Market Street, Chinatown. And I guess just really briefly what we learned the importance of developing political imagination and creativity, and that we have to learn how to do synthesis as well as analysis. And also just, not that this is so easy, but be in the right place at the right time. And what that involves is taking the long view, meeting people, making friends, keeping them by working with them and helping them out over time. So anyway, thank you so much. And I'm going to put our contact information in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan Tom, for the very interesting talk about Japantown in San Jose. And our next discussants are Zen Sekizawa, Mario Correa, Henrique Aoki, members of J-Town Action and Solidarity. The theme of the presentation is Little Tokyo.
Thanks so much. I'm Henry.
I'm Zen.
Unfortunately, Mario wasn't able to be with us today. So in Little Tokyo, there's ongoing oppression of unhoused people, and including police violence and attempts to displace unhoused folks in the area. And unfortunately, we had to mobilize to try and defend against that violence today. So Mario wasn't able to make it. So I know we're running a little bit behind on time. So we're going to compress a little bit so that way we can hopefully get into the Q&A with people. See here. So I want to talk just a little bit first about the history of Little Tokyo, just to give a little contextualization, and then we'll talk a little bit about the work that we do there. So Little Tokyo is based in Los Angeles, historically the ancestral land of the Tongva people, indigenous people of the area. Its earliest sort of incarnation starts in the 1880s. So this is in the aftermath of Chinese exclusion and the search for new labor sources on the West Coast. So we have migrant laborers staying in like boarding houses and stuff in what's going to become the downtown Los Angeles area. Little Tokyo is the second oldest neighborhood in Los Angeles. Number one is El Pueblo, and it's the oldest still existing Japantown in the United States. So Little Tokyo, it originally was much larger than it is now. So we're based in Los Angeles. South to us is Skid Row, which is the largest concentration of unhoused people in Los Angeles and one of the largest in the entire US. To the east is, well, kind of Arts District and then East Los Angeles. Little Tokyo used to be almost twice the size, I think, of its current status right now. The first main decrease in the size of Little Tokyo happened with World War II, obviously with the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans. Little Tokyo then became an area called Bronzeville, which is a predominantly African American community. And then after the war, Japanese businesses were coming back. The people who owned the land, which were white landlords, chose that they wanted to make Little Tokyo more Japanese and specifically not African Americans. So white landlords chose not to renew a lot of the leases for Black business owners and Black tenants. And there was a movement of a lot of Black tenants onto the sort of western part of what was still Little Tokyo. And then most of that area actually got seized by the city under eminent domain to become what became Parker Center. And actually the total area that was constituting Little Tokyo Bronzeville, almost 1/4 of it got swallowed up by the city to establish the Parker Center, which was an LAPD headquarters. So Little Tokyo lost a lot of its territory through that. And then in the 1970s, redevelopment occurred, which was, corporate and city cooperative attempt to gentrify and change the state of the city. LAPD stands for the Los Angeles Police Department. And there we saw a really interesting development, which was the introduction of overseas Japanese capital. So groups like the Kajima Corporation constructed like a luxury hotel called New Otani, displaced a lot of working people in the area. And as a result, Little Tokyo's territory further shrunk. So now we're much, much smaller than our sort of historical origin. There's many less working people. Historically, Little Tokyo is a working people's community. It's built off of migrant workers, but that housing has declined dramatically. Now, there's of course always been a long history of struggle in Little Tokyo to try and fight against that development. So we do have sections of affordable housing, a lot of seniors who live in Little Tokyo, but we're sort of constantly under threat. And right now, for instance, we're facing new developments that's going to be happening on our southern border. This developer called Continuum Partners is coming in to try and build this massive, massive complex in this building formerly owned by a company called Cold Storage, and it's threatening to change the entire face of the organization. Local businesses,
face of the community.
Change the face of the community. A lot of local businesses are being pushed out right now. A local community business that we're organizing around is called Sweat Hero Cafe. It's a local restaurant. It's been there since the 80s. And the landlord, who's not part of the community, just decided that he wants Little Tokyo to be a more trendy area. He's been quoted as saying that. And so he didn't decide to renew their lease. So we've been facing a lot of these shifts. And at the same time, Little Tokyo, like I said, borders the Skid Row, which is the largest concentration of unhoused people in Los Angeles, most of whom, but not all, are African American, some of whom are also Japanese American, some of whom are Latino. And so we have this massive intersection of police presence. We still have, so the Parker Center isn't the police HQ anymore, but the LAPD headquarters is still down the street from us. So we have this massive intersection of police presence, of a mix of capital that's gentrifying the area, and working people are constantly being increasingly marginalized and pushed out of our community. And so that's the intersections, that's the situation we're dealing with. And then we start in 2021 at the height of the pandemic, when all of these contradictions, all of these tensions are obviously starting to get more and more intensified. And I'll turn things on.
Yeah, that's a really great sum up. I think I want to add that we're also surrounded by men's jail, men's detention center, and Homeland Security. So we are really surrounded by a lot of oppressive forces in Little Tokyo, and the battles are really gnarly. So yeah, like Henry said, so J-Town Action Solidarity started in 2021 and in the beginning of the year, when an encampment of unhoused folks popped up in Toriumi Plaza. There are probably like 35 people there, maybe more than that. So we partnered with Theo Henderson, who has a podcast called We the Unhoused, and it is told from an unhoused perspective. We met him many years prior when he was unhoused in Chinatown, and we had a relationship with him. So we started our mutual aid program where we distributed, still distribute every Saturday afternoon in Little Tokyo, hot meals. We charge devices. We have harm reduction, information, snacks. Yeah, so I mean, we do that every week. And also, just to back up a little bit, we're a grassroots collective dedicated to revolutionary organizing in Little Tokyo and building community power. And we're about, I'd say like 30-ish active members. Yeah, and then also our organization, like Henry was saying, we fight, gentrification, and we fight all these things. They're all connected. And, I think one of the biggest things that we've seen with unhoused folks and like how we can kind of like mobilize or at least talk to our community about it is like through Executive Order 9066 and the unhoused, basically. How would you explain 4118? Like,
so just for those who don't know, Executive Order 9066, right, was the order that was issued by the president to displace Japanese Americans and ultimately incarcerate Japanese Americans in concentration camps. And so, like in Los Angeles, recently the city council, well, not that recently, over a year ago, passed an ordinance 4118, which called for the mass dispersion of unhoused people throughout the city. So we've been attempting to draw connections and using like posters, using propaganda, other things to try and explain and demonstrate how these different forms of displacement are all connected and how this is a connected struggle. So we should understand that if we want to say like never again is now, for instance, with regards to our mass incarceration, our concentration camp experience, we have to be fighting displacement in all forms that's manifesting today.
Yeah. I mean, I think the tactics are the same. Like you get shipped off, not knowing where you are, like where you're going. You have a couple minutes to pack like 2 bags. So there's very similar forced removal sort of things happening in Little Tokyo. Sorry, I'm just going through my notes. So yeah, we have anti-gentrification work. We fight developers. We're fighting landlords. The BID, the Business Improvement District, which is like a private security for gentrifiers. It's just like a wing of the LAPD, of the police department. And then like Henry said, we also support sweep defense, which is like so heavily policed. And, the city comes and they just take everyone's things in 5 minutes and throws them in the trash. And like, it's just total disregard for any sort of humanity. And, we do that almost weekly as well. And we have political education. We fight art. We talk about art washing, which is, I think a subject that most people don't talk about enough for us. Some of us in the group have started with Defend Boyle Heights against the bigger art galleries that were moving into the Boyle Heights area. Very successful campaign against these giant galleries and institutions that were trying to come into a working class area. So those kind of in a nutshell what is happening.
And Harry, thank you for this remarkable presentation.